please make your way upstairs, find a seat, get nice and cozy with someone nearby, and we'll give you a little more speech and then we'll get started. So go ahead and start making your way up. Thank you. Get this. Hello, Annie. I would introduce you to everyone here, but... Okay, you almost got away with it. You can't watch the interview first without seeing INFLICTION. So stop, take a moment, and go watch INFLICTION. You can find it in the description, and it'll make this interview so much better. So go off, enjoy the film, and then come back to this spot, and boom! Watch the interview. Alright, I'm gonna go now. And you better go watch that movie if you haven't. If you haven't, I'll know. Thank you. Get this. Hello, Annie. I would introduce you to everyone here, but I don't think I need to. Clearly, a lot of these people
probably
are, as you said
not.
earlier. They're clearly people who have come out to support you in force, which is frankly awesome. However, jumping into this, we're going to take it a little bit normal first. Because while these people have known you for a long time, and while there are people here from our community who have known you as well, there is a gap between when they've known you. A lot of these people, they knew the old Annie. A lot of the new people from VR chat, they know the new you.
Yes.
And so it kind of to build foundation for some of these questions that I have as your friend, I want you to talk briefly on kind of your path that led you to here, maybe from even when you were, a kid, whenever you started getting into this. Just very briefly, a path, like a timeline that led you to being someone who now has a film, specifically in VR chat, which is less common than just having a film probably.
So, I come from, like, Xbox Live, funny enough. That's kind of where I got my start. Basically, like, I was really young. I must have been, like, 5, maybe 8 years old, and I was messing around with Halo, like Halo 3, Halo Reach, like Machinima. And that was kind of my start into these online networks of people that just kind of come together to do these things. And then at some point, I actually met the person that this film is dedicated to on Halo Reach. I met C there. And they taught me a lot about creativity and just art and how to process things. And I'm sure we'll get into that more later. But that's how we met, and whenever I go into a new section in a new chapter of my life, I like to bring some people with me and start something new, and obviously these are no exceptions. So afterwards, I want to say maybe it was like, I don't know, I was like 13 years old, 12 years old, maybe even younger, and I got into Call of Duty editing, mostly PC editing. And there's a really clear distinction between what I did with Call of Duty compared to a lot of other Call of Duty editors, which is that a lot of them played the game and they wanted to edit. I just wanted to edit. That's all I cared about. So I got really, really good at that over 3-5 years, versus people that played the game and balance editing and wanted to show off their clips and stuff. I was very against that. At some point during that excursion with Call of Duty, I started to get some attention for just, my style and vibe or whatever. Some of the things that people have pointed out now in VR chat. And to me, Call of Duty editing is also another form of machinima, so it felt like a natural evolution. There I made 2 very avant-garde short films that aren't really narrative in nature, but they're still very much part of my style and my history, my repertoire, Fabrication and Victim. And there's definitely a lineage there between that and what I'm doing now, but that to me was also just like a type of machinima. And then moving on from that, I took a large point in my life to kind of work on myself, and that's where I met a lot of these lovely people. Actually, it was afterwards. That's where I met Pleasant. That's where I started hanging out in GR. Like, that's where I started hanging out with the writer people, and that's where I started to really start to improve on myself and become more interested in filmmaking explicitly rather than these avant-garde abstract ideas, even though I still really loved those. You could argue that this film has been in production since the summer of 2023 when I tried to make a live-action short film with 2 other people, and we shot it, and we got very quickly humbled, and we realized how difficult filmmaking really is. and it got totally canned.
Yeah.
But that's where my roots are, very much machinima, and I think that VR chat lends itself to being machinima very strongly, while also kind of being an interesting evolution of it. Because for the first time, it's not like, hey, here's a shooter that you're making a short in. Here's a shooter that we're happening to make a comedy in. It's actually we're here to talk. And if we had to make real life a video game, a lot of it is talking. A lot of it is relaying information to each other. So in a way, I feel like VR chat's the first thing I've gotten into where it's not explicitly machinima, but it still technically is, because you're obviously making something with a real time video game. And I've been following VR chat filmmaking from early 2024, and that's kind of how I got into here. So it's very much like lineage of machinima and that kind of interest of mine alongside filmmaking, getting better at like understanding filmmaking more, and still having that interest from machinima kind of brought me here to VR chat. That's where I met a lot of you people here today as well. And that's kind of where this spark started. It's actually Call of Duty is the reason why I got a message from Ariel Emerald in December of 2024 to say, hey, join this VR chat film jam, the first one that they ever did, the 48-hour one in December of 2024. It was like 3 days left. And I said, yes, go, I'm doing that. And that was my introduction to the scene. It was this explosive launch, and I'm the editor, and we're doing this. So yes, there's very much a lineage of history. But I've been doing this before I was even 10 years old. So definitely, I don't know.
Definitely a lifestyle. That's for
yes,
sure.
Very much
of that
so.
maybe, but this art form is definitely a lifestyle that you've been following.
Yes.
Earlier, you mentioned the style that you kind of coined in your Call of Duty days. And I've learned this through you, because we've worked on things together. But you were very, very picky on what you post to the Annexuo channel.
Yes.
To that brand. You were very picky about that. And for anyone who does not know, it's been 5 years. 5 years since you have posted on there. For the first time last week, there was a new post, and that was the teaser for INFLICTION, which had gotten a lot of people coming back saying, the goat's back. I'm so excited for this year. People are very clearly from the brand that you built in the past are very excited. And looking around, there's proof, because a lot of them are here right now. They're very excited for what you're doing now. But obviously, that was 5 years ago. In 5 years, you've changed. You moved on. You're on a new platform, chasing a new version of what that brand is. I'm very curious where your thoughts are lying in how the old community you've built is going to react to the new you, and even how the old community is going to meld with the new people who are going to come and who are going to find you from what you're doing now. Do you have concerns, or have you had thoughts about how that's going to basically,
I think
together?
a lot of there's been a lot of similarities in my time between VR chat and Call of Duty editing, but there's also a lot of differences. There's probably more differences than similarities, and I'm just very strongly latching on to the similarities, because it's like, oh, I know that. I'm familiar with that. And familiar can be dangerous, because it kind of blinds you to what's different. So when I was thinking about this film, it was very much like, I knew very early on it was going to be an Annexuo project. I just didn't know if it was going to meet the quality that I had set for myself in that when using VR chat. I was personally a skeptic for my own art. Not necessarily that I didn't believe that it wasn't possible, but that it was just like, what would I bring to the table that's very different from other VR chat filmmakers? And Call of Duty is a very VFX heavy community. They're very concerned with the look and texture and feel of visuals, but they might not be the most concerned with, but what does it mean? And why did you put that there? And why is that cut like that? They're not as concerned about that. And VR chat's very different, where the actual look and consistency of the visual footage might not be as high of a priority as much as what you're trying to say and what you're trying to do. So in that sense, it's a lot more like traditional filmmaking. And there's a lot of parts of this process that were a lot more like traditional filmmaking than the things I did with COD. COD, my computer is a whole studio, and anybody can run around and do anything for me in that studio. And this is different. I had to direct people. I had to write a typical script. I got voice actors. I got body actors. One of the body actors is here that worked with me very, very early on, and I'm very happy to have them here as well. Shout out. And all that kind of stuff. So I just, like, that part of this experience is very new. And in that sense, I don't know how the community is going to react. I noticed that since I dabbled in Call of Duty, the community has changed a lot. And since I kind of took a break from it. And first of all, wasn't going to go through this whole interview without saying this word. A lot of them are a lot more queer and a lot more accepting than they used to be. The Call of Duty community was known for being very toxic, but people would say how they felt, and now there's a lot more like weird acceptance. And the people that thought that I was weird 5 years ago now probably think that my stuff is kind of cool, alongside the people that I worked with. Definitely my colleagues are now in that super cool, super evolutionary territory, that starstruck territory. So I think in that sense, they're definitely going to have a little bit of a struck of like, whoa, this is VR chat and all that kind of stuff. But also, this is very much closer to a traditional film. I feel as if I can show this film to people who aren't super like artsy fartsy or whatever, like the super knee deep into these experimental, like pieces, and still get something out of it. While originally with Call of Duty, it just wasn't possible. It was like, hey, here's soldiers and shapes and colors running across the screen. You had to be in the know to know. This is a lot more accessible. So a large focus for me right now is making Annexuo more accessible to people that might not be too familiar, while not compromising on my own vision. And that way, in a way, for me, was just more traditional filmmaking. So I don't know how they're going to react to that, because I don't know how those people react to a good script, But I do know that the people here and the audience that I'm aiming for to be exposed to me for the first time, I know that this is different, and that hasn't changed. The work that I do and the work under Annexuo is always going to be different, and it's always going to be from me. It's from my mind. It's from my heart and my soul, and very emotionally charged. None of that changed on this film. This is still very truly my film, and there were parts of the production where I felt like I was running from that, but right now that is definitely not the case. We are definitely in a period where this film is undoubtedly mine. So if anybody's really about Annexuo or whatever the heck, they'll find it here. 1,000% they're going to find it here. And I'm very proud to say that, because that was a huge concern of mine going into this project, was like, oh, I'm revealing myself too much. I'm too open. I'm too obvious. And no, that's actually been a really big drawing point in why people have really engaged with the film. So I hope that answered your question. That's a very comprehensive answer.
It kind of answered two of them, because I also was curious what exactly makes a film worthy of your brand, which you went into, the quality,
yes,
the intention, things like that. So that answered that question too. You did mention in that talk about this, you mentioned you want to make yourself more acceptable, or the brand more acceptable.
Accessible.
Accessible,
not acceptable. Different words.
Without compromising. And I've noticed through at least the last half of the process of you getting back on this project and finishing it up, there was a lot of times where you'd screen to your friends to kind of get the vibe, what people were getting, and you basically had to add a lot of kind of like flag markers, hints, obvious things to make it more accessible and understood. Where have you, now that you finished, fell in this mindset that we all have to play with how obvious we make things versus how much do we let people have to figure it out their own? Like, where have you landed now after this?
Well, I think that, interestingly enough, some of my favorite stuff in the film actually originated from that. For example, the strips, the actual physical film strips that come up in the film to kind of denote, hey, we're going into an interview. That's one of my favorite aspects of the film that exists right now, and that was never in the script. That was never written down. That was very much me trying to communicate to the audience, hey, this is going to be an interview. And the other thing is that the internal monologues were kind of an idea floating around in my head, but I was very hesitant on pursuing them. And now future Lucy's monologue is like probably my favorite scene in the whole film in terms of when I watch it, because very much just a lot of things happened in that moment, and it was a full circle moment in the mix and everything. I mean, it's one of those really strong technical points, so that when you've got that down, the rest of the thing is going to be possible. It was like a litmus test. So in that sense, I really like that. I will say that it's very common for people to give you feedback and then give you a suggestion that I don't know how people are with like social cues or whatever, but for me, it's like when I get a suggestion I don't like in terms of how to fix it, it's very different from a suggestion that I don't like because I don't know what they're saying or I don't agree with them. So usually I agree with people on what they're saying in terms of reacting to the film, because it's their opinion and it's how they're processing it. And I usually disagree on how to solve it. A good example recently was I think somebody had suggested putting a lot of sound in between the cuts, the cut to black. and to make it kind of easier to understand that we're going into a new sequence. I liked how harsh and in your face it was. So part of my solution was to add establishing shots for the locations, because those were not in the edit for a very long time. And that, I think, helped ease the transition while still getting me that punch of cutting the black and then going into a new future segment or time travel or fiction segment, however you want to phrase it. And that's very much an example where you as an editor, as a director, or anybody creative really needs to apply themselves and to understand, hey, what decision am I going to make to try to accommodate for this, but in a way that they can understand? Because I'm very much a believer that people know when something's good, but they might not have the best way to explain it. And likewise, people know when something is cool and stuff, but they might not know what they want entirely. So if you just give them what they want, they'll just go like, oh, that's cool. But if you give them something really creatively charged and communicative, they'll be like, whoa, that was really cool, because they get it and they feel way more involved in your vision because you really brought yourself to solving that problem. With that being said, there were some things that genuinely, like, I just didn't want in the film in terms of, like, until maybe way later, that were from, like, screenings and stuff, as you mentioned. Shout out to all the test screeners, to everybody who saw the film before it came out. I'm sure I've been very annoying about this, and I apologize about that for being so annoying about watching the film. But I wrote down so many notes. There were so many comments, and that was a huge help into making this film what it is today. So again, without the test screeners, without people like viewing what I was doing, this would have been a way harder to parse film. And with that being said, I don't think there were any decisions that I'm not happy with in the end, but I definitely do remember there were some decisions where I was like, maybe, I don't know. But I gave everything a shot. If you suggested something and I didn't give it a shot, that must have meant I really didn't like it. But that like never happened. Like pretty much everything everybody suggested got into the film at one point, and I tried it out and I vetted it with some people, and we had discussions about it. Even a totally different plot line got tested and vetted, not shot, but like as an animatic, and stuff like that. So a lot of things were tested, found out in the moment, and that's not unusual. So that's. I'm
starting to remember that I don't think you ever really asked me to come and test any of your films. Not very much. Where was I during all this time? Left out.
I think you saw a few cuts though.
I saw a few cuts, but not in the sense of like, hey, I'm testing this. Anyway,
no, you were never like into paint that strongly. No,
yes.
I couldn't get a hold of you.
Enough
man.
of that.
No,
it's fine. We have passed the first 10-minute mark, so we do have room for a audience question if there are one.
This guy has.
I would say,
man, that's why.
Job. I would say raise your hands, but clearly a lot of you are on desktop, so I suppose you could jump. Now, first one I've seen, right on the side.
When did you know that you wanted to make this movie?
That's a really that is a strong question. Do you mean this movie specifically, or do you mean like when did I know that I wanted to make a short film more narratively? Like
well, I guess both of those.
Okay, so I mentioned it earlier of I tried to make a short film in summer 2023. We shot for about a week, me and two other people, and it didn't really go anywhere. Then we tried to do reshoots in December of that year, also didn't really go anywhere, and there was just a lot of failed projects. Fluorite moment, yes, the film was codenamed Fluorite, and one of the two people are here. Look at that. And in 2024. I would say like summer 2024, I was prepping to work on what was eventually going to become a feature. And progress was actually going pretty strong on that in terms of like casting and trying to figure people out. And then that faded message happened with Ariel and stuff, and that's what really occurred. But to make this film, it was actually very strongly inspired by that person that I dedicated the film to. The last time we talked, and I'm sure we'll get into it later because I'm sure you know the story, Fawnde. The last time we talked, he works in IT, and he had gotten very jaded in his life, and we were one of those friends where like you call every 6 months and it felt like you talked yesterday. Like you don't call for a year and then you get back on the phone and it's like everything's fine and everything's brilliant. And he told me, he was like, I don't want you doing the shit that I'm doing. He was very clear about that. And I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, we talked last time you were looking into doing computer networking and stuff. I don't want you doing any of that. You're too capable for that. And not that the job was quote unquote above me or whatever, but it's just not what I was here to do, is what he made it sound like. And, when the opportunity with Ariel came to my desk and I did the film jam, it just felt like that was like a moment where I was really like, I wanted to do right by him. And that's really where this film started to come from, emotionally and just in terms of how it manifests as a story, was very much from that thought, because it was actually one of the last things he ever said to me. So it always stuck with me. And I figured, and it's one of the last things I did in the production was dedicate the film to him, because without him and what he said, the film wouldn't have happened. So that was probably the moment that replaying in my head and just thoughts of all these other people that have influenced me and how strongly I know I am as a creative like noggin. It just all kind of came together to say I should really stop messing around and try to make something impactful and really just to say and really to process those emotions honestly. And that's really the crux of it. I hope that answered your question. I know I talk a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I owe you $1, maybe $2. Does Andy end up answering 2 questions?
I do that. I'm really sorry. I go on and on and on. I'm like,
I should ask this one later, and then you answer it way earlier than I was going to ask. I'm like, what the?
I'm like firing on all cylinders trying to answer these questions. So,
yes. Let's talk a little bit more about Infliction then. I do have more questions that are kind of outside of it, but let's start with the tagline. Art without friction is inherently false.
Yes.
Where did that originate for you, and why is that your truth?
Yes, it is my truth. That's a good point. I think it early versions of the film were very critical of mostly parasocial relationships. There were versions of the script where Eve, the purple one, was a lot like treated way worse and way harsher. And part of that was like there were a good amount of people on cast and crew when we were shooting that had experience with people being very strange about parasocial relationships. And part of it was very simply that it was a pressing topic in my head that I didn't think had been explored through internet film means very strongly. And that I think it relates to this idea of like, okay, well, if you could go back and you could go meet, I don't know, Tears for Fears in the 80s and you could tell them how amazing they are and whatever, would you do it? Blah, 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 blah. And all these things in hindsight. Everything exists in hindsight. And that to me didn't... Hindsight is nothing until you get it, So that to me was why I wrote that idea of like, if you don't try for your art, as in like, not necessarily like, like you don't need to bleed on the canvas. I certainly did, but you don't need to. But this requires something from you. And, I think also, early 2025, there's still a lot of discussions about generative AI art and stuff like that as well. And there was a lot of discussion about people saying, oh, you don't need to put in the work to get this result. And I was like, well, then I'm not fucking interested. I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in things that just come easy without any effort, without any whatever. I don't know. It just wasn't very intriguing to me. Because that's just how I felt. I felt like whenever I see an artist really put themselves out there, even if it's a comedy, even if it's just something to make them laugh, when they're really thinking about the jokes and really trying hard, I care about that. And that was why to me, it's like, if you don't have some friction into making your vision possible, is it even new? Is it even exciting? Is it even something that we should really pay attention to? Or is it just something that you're going to stash away in a room or whatever? And God knows how many times I have made something with a lot of friction in it that I have stashed away in my room. So that was another thing, was that I had to be true to myself and say, I'm going to do this anyway. I'm always going to have some sort of roadblock or challenge to solve. Because if you're not solving any problems in your art, what are you, in my opinion, what are you doing? Right? Like, to me, that's just not interesting. So that's where that truth came from. And very much it felt like Eve is this escapist, is this idea that she is going to a different time period to look at this artist that she so deeply respects, But that artist struggled very much to get to what they did, and obviously struggle emotionally even in the film. So even in the final film. So it's just like that to me was very present. Was this idea of like, oh, dude, if I was an artist in the 70s, if I made this music in the 70s, I'd be rich. I'd be with RCA right now. You're avoiding the problem in front of you. That to me was how it felt, and it felt like I wanted to. This is a very if you didn't detect, it's a very anti-escape movie. So that was the part of that.
Which is very interesting to be made within VRChat, which is famously a place people escape to.
Yeah.
Which perhaps makes it more potent, at least in the long run.
Well, I think escape, if you don't mind, I think escape needs to be reframed a bit, because people think of escape and they're like, okay, so I don't want to live my normal life, so I'm going to go live a life in VRChat. That's still a life. I don't know if that's escaping. If you have responsibilities, or you have an event, or you have something to do, or you have people to check up on, that's a life. And, some people just live lives in different ways. That's not escaping. And there are some scenarios where you do genuinely want to leave. But leaving is not escaping in the same way that moving on is not letting go, right? And like they're conflating different things to, like, I don't know, people kind of just like associate these two meanings to be the same thing. That if you leave home, you're escaping, and it's like, oh, it's a prison, I'm escaping. I don't know. And that's, to me, is a large part of it. So to me, VRChat, and the way that I see a lot of people play VRChat now, particularly if you're not like just like crowding like public instances and stuff, if you're really doing events, if you're really trying to build a community, that's not an escape. You're doing something.
I do agree.
So yeah, that was my thought process making it in VRChat. Are there people in VRChat that need to hear, hey, maybe you need to live your own life and not live it inside of a headset? Probably, but that wasn't the point of the film. The point of the film was very a lot more introspective and a lot more about artists than explicitly about people doing that. So if it was about that, I would have been a lot harder on it.
Well, you were almost much harder on it, in the sense the original script with Eve, Lucy was much more mean.
Yes.
Much more hateful.
Much more mean.
Which is almost a hint that we just said, where you would have been more mean. Obviously, you ended up choosing to pull that back and make it a little bit more mutual in their emotions between each other. So that being said, I do want to actually talk about Eve and Lucy a little bit. Specifically, the first thing I want to go into is the look, the design. On VRChat, we know that you found avatars and you chose that they look this way. But for people who didn't understand, Eve looks a lot different than Lucy. Lucy seems more human. They have more rounded features, even though it's still, cartoony. While Eve is more like polygons, more botsy. Why did you choose to make Eve look that way versus Lucy, who looks more human and normal?
This is where the nerd science fiction stuff happens, so sorry to anybody who doesn't find that interesting. It's a time travel plot in terms of the fiction of the film. And one of the ideas that I had come up with trying to figure out my own take on time travel, which is very strongly inspired by Don Hertzfeldt's World Tomorrow. But basically, you take that world, you remove cloning, and you get it through my brain, and you get infliction. That's kind of how it turned out. And one of the key elements that I thought of was that as technology progresses, the way that we express ourselves progresses, right? There was a time you couldn't get a tattoo on your arm, for example. And like that kind of thought process of like, yes, people have been changing themselves and whatever, physically, mentally, what have you, like all the time. But as technology progresses, the ability to do that progresses. And it's actually a hint on the computer screen, the train ticket, when it says like visual presentation fallback or something like that. That's the kind of the hint that's going to happen. The idea was that in Eve's time period where she's actually from, she looks a certain way that doesn't work, that genuinely just like isn't compatible with the technology of the time. She has to do the whole trip like that, which is why at the very, 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 very end of the film, you actually don't see Eve. You hear her, but you don't see her. And that was a very deliberate decision to make sure that like that stayed consistent, that whatever she's really supposed to look like or whatever is really up into your head. Granted, I do think that not a lot of people have picked up on that because it's a very packed film, and the genuine science fiction world building is a lot less important in this film. It wasn't the biggest focus. It also is just to play on the idea of like, it's a VR chat fallback avatar, back when those were like, had to go out of your way to make one dedicated versus like imposters and stuff. That was kind of like a play on that idea. I wanted to see how you could creatively use elements of VR chat in world building. So for us on set, every time we would travel between time, we just dropped a portal. And you can't do that on a real set, And that was just like a cool way to do this world building and to actually get people involved in it as well. It's like, oh, you're from the future because the way you look literally isn't even compatible in our time. And that was like a fun way to spin the fallback avatar. And it just stuck. It stuck,
Yeah, I think this is one of the more interesting aspects of the film for me. Obviously, I have a little bit of privilege of having seen it a few times, so my understanding is a little more in depth than people who have just seen it the first time.
Sure.
But one of my most interesting things, even though it's lower in importance, is the lore and the science and the things you've thought of, such as why the avatar looks different. Because while that's not a mainstay, these little subconscious acts in the film, add into our subconscious enjoyment of it. And the thing I want to go into now is in the little corner, the little titles you've added for the years.
Yes.
Throughout the film, you start at 09, and I believe you go to 20 something or 65, and then you jump to I think 89 at the end.
I might be wrong. I think it's 09, 32, and then 65, and then
65, and then 89,
and then 89.
I didn't know what the
You
third.
said 89.
Yeah, I didn't know what the second one was.
Because it kept changing.
Yes. My question with this is, while that is a very small detail that you'd really have to be looking for to notice,
Yes.
and also there's hardly any, hint at it in the actual film itself. How is this time being experienced for our main characters? Because at the very end, when it jumps, I believe 24 years from 65 to 89, Eve says, "I think it's been an hour."
Yes.
Which clearly, if you look at the numbers, that's been 24 years.
Yeah.
So how are these characters experiencing this time?
That is a very pivotal question. I think that the analogy of like hopping through a portal is very clear, because you can spend 4 hours in VR chat and go to like 8 different places, and that in that way, I kind of just treated time as a place, not really as something of a momentum, the way that it is for obviously pretty much like everybody else makes these films. It's like, oh, time has passed. Yeah. The way that time passes in this film is very non-linear, and that the documentarian portion of the film doesn't help with that, but it was by design. Mm-hmm. It was by design to be, these characters are going to do some things off screen as well. So to me, when they say an hour, I think it's that they've been waiting at the train station for about an hour. And you just don't see that because they just got there. They're just there, and they're having that moment. The film doesn't take place in the past or the future or the present. It just takes place in its moment, because in its moment is this intersection of so many things, because everybody lives a different present was the idea. And this is very Tenet coded, so I'm sorry if I break someone's brain, but the idea really early on was that Eve is always going backwards in time, and Lucy's going like this. So eventually they have to intersect, and they merge. So if Eve's like, okay, I'm going backwards, I'm going to try to interview Lucy when she's 40 years old. Lucy's already been through the interview when she's 20 years old. So by 40, she's like, I don't need to do this again. I already went through this. But Eve hasn't gone through it yet. So she, still going back. And then there's the intersection. And that's the intersection is where the film actually takes place. Is this really Goldilocks moment where they can interact with each other. And then after that, not really. And then this is so nitpicky, but also, as you mentioned, it's 09, 32, whatever. It's not 2309 or whatever. And please don't take that as a statement saying that it takes place in 2309. It does not. It's an unknown time. And it's very clear. It's so important to me that it is unknown, that you don't know when whatever year, because then people are going to be like, oh, so in 300 years, you think this is going to happen, or in 300 years, this, in 300 years. No, there's no relation to our current time periods. It could be a different galaxy, universe, whatever. It doesn't matter. And that was a very key point for me to make. It was to the degree that in early versions of the script, there were no years, and that it was actually all based off of 0. So the point where they intersect was known as 0 for so long. And it was only because people got really confused during test screenings about, oh, is that 20 years? Oh, she says the line, 20 years. So what is this, 60, 50, 80? I don't know. It could be 120. And people got really confused about it. So I came up with a compromise, which was the XX to denote that. But it was like 20 years plus 0, 40 years plus 0, 60 years plus 0, and then like minus 0 would be before the intersection. So like if Eve was like a kid, it would be like minus 0. It was very like so adamant on making it not clear that it was a specific year of like 2359 or something like that. That and I don't know why I keep going to 23, maybe because I watched a movie that takes place in that year. But like that was so like I was so against that. I didn't want that to be the case.
See, with your explanation, it made sense. I thought it made sense at first until you said the years would have been negative, which I don't think the film starts at that point.
No. It's
but
like
my confusion is I thought it might have been because the film starts with Lucy going, "Who taught?" And then following up after a sentence, she says, "Like not this again. It's just 2 days," as if she's been through it before.
Right.
So I was wanting to ask you what's that dialogue means, because it either sounds with explanation as if she's experienced it once before and gets it, or if she's just someone who happens to have people looking for her. But there's obviously there's no description of any of that, so you can't really determine that why she chooses to start that kind of dialogue off.
This is where I get to talk about the interviews a little bit more, which is obviously a really big structural point of the film. The interviews very clearly talk about the process of artistry and alongside the process of being your own person during that, which I actually think is a good way to view the whole film in its entirety. And that's where those kind of comments came from. I think it was in the voice acting audition where I wrote something like, Lucy Ron is an up-and-coming artist that is controlled by a marring industry. And, like, that was kind of the commentary, was this idea that, like, there's this whole artistic industry that's always going to be difficult no matter what, and it just matters what time period you're in. Well, it doesn't matter what time period you're in. Sorry, I should correct myself. Like, music is really hard to break into in the 70s and 80s, the way it's really hard to break into now. The way it is to break into it is different. The way that people treat you negatively is different. Yes, but the fact that it's happening is the same. So escaping, again, to 80 years in the past to be like, here's this amazing artist that came up during this time, I can't believe it. It doesn't actually make it easier. And that was the point of that dialogue, was to kind of show that Lucy is very not willing to trust anybody. And I think that kind of carries into the entire time in between time segment, where it's very much like so much of the dialogue is like, what the hell? Like what other option do I have? Like, what am I doing? Like, I literally just feel so out of control of my own life. And I think that a lot of artists in any time period relate to the idea that their life is just totally out of their control and out of their circumstances. And it's a very universal experience for artists. And that's where that dialogue kind of came from, was this idea of just like, it's just 2 days. I just have to survive 2 days. I don't know. Maybe my manager calls me in 2 days or whatever, and stuff like that. And there's little Easter eggs that always like hint to that. Like, for example, during the home segment, when she sees herself for the first time in the future, she's on the phone, and that's why that motion's like that and stuff. And the card on the bottom right of the screen does say like scouting managers and stuff. So there's always like those hints of that happening in the background. But it became a more background element to the film. So that was always something I was concerned about with the scene. But at some point, you gotta let go of the movie, man.
That's true.
So
we definitely love our reasons to rewatch movies. We love our little secrets.
Yes, I fully implore people to rewatch this film. I think during a lot of test screenings, they were like, "Can you play it again?" Just because they wanted to understand it better.
I can verify that.
Yeah.
So perfect. We do now we've actually missed time for one of our
I'm so sorry.
questions.
I talk way too much.
I mean, this is for you. This is about you. We do have an audience question, though. If there's anyone who wishes to raise hands, jump.
Raise hand or jump. Do we have any jumpers?
I think they're doing. Oh,
Tiki and Relpy.
Let's.
I saw both of them jump. I'm just saying what I saw.
We'll give you the choice, Annie.
No, I was just playing.
Oh.
Okay. Relpy.
I want to know what inspired the way you approach this movie, like other pieces of media or anything else how you approach this film particularly.
I think you just want me to mention Funeral Parade of Roses, which I very gladly will. I'm very gladly
love talking
will.
about that.
I love talking about Funeral Parade of
I
Roses.
am manipulating you to talk.
Yeah, you're very much trying to get me
You
to
don't
talk.
have to.
Because for context, I told Ralphie about Funeral Parade of Roses because I tell a lot of people about Funeral Parade of Roses, 1969. Okay. Yes, that film was really strongly inspirational in terms of the structure of the structure of Infliction, in terms of having the documentary portions of it shot in VR chat kind of intersect. And people that have known me for a long time will know that I've wanted to do that in a movie forever. I've wanted to do that in a movie for like 4 years or something. It's been a really long time. I've been fascinated by this idea of blurring fiction and reality, because to me, it's like all fiction is based off of reality. And sometimes how informative these fictional pieces can be to who we are, reality can be based in fiction. And there's just this blurring of this line that I found was so fascinating. And I thought VR chat was a brilliant platform to explore that on, because look at me. I'm look how thick my outlines are, and look how many different types of people are here right now. This wouldn't happen in an actual room. And there is a fiction to that, but there also is a reality to that. Just the other day during the production house meet, we were talking about how avatars fit people and what kind of like vibe they give off and stuff. And I don't know if I fit this avatar and stuff. So like those types of discussions bring out a lot of reality in this fiction. And that was a massive influence, because very much so the actors are playing things that are real to them, but there is still very much a falsehood underneath it. But throughout that falsehood, there's so much truth. And if anyone is familiar with me as a person, you'll also know that I just find this endlessly fascinating, and this will not be the last time you hear me say something along the lines of like a series of truth within lies or something. I just find this concept so like it's just this enigma that I love exploring. Funeral Parade of Roses, iconically, is just this really strange film for its time period. And one of the elements of it that's so strange is that it will just stop the fictional part of the movie and have the actors come on and talk about their experiences with some of the things that happen in film. For example, there's a lot of drug use in that movie. So eventually they just kind of cut and they interview somebody about their experience with these drugs. And they're just playing themselves. Like they're not playing a character. But somehow it finds its way weaving into the flow and the fabric of that film. And I just found that so endlessly fascinating when I watched that as, I don't know, like a 12-year-old or something. Don't watch that as a 12-year-old. We're all adults here. We can watch it, but just don't.
I'm gonna go back in time just to watch it.
Yeah, that's it. No, yeah. I'm gonna do the thing you told me not to do in the movie, just so I can do that to you. And then the other element of it is very much Don Hertzfeldt. I think in general, Don Hertzfeldt made me want to do time travel, because I thought time travel was stupid, and then I watched his movie or his short films, the World of Tomorrow trilogy, and I was kind of convinced that he also thought time travel was stupid. In his own way, I think he approaches it, don't get me wrong, but there was just something really gratifying about somebody else who so clearly is talented at storytelling and making people feel emotional, and also indie animation, and being like, hey, I also think time travel is dumb in a way, but I still made a time travel movie. And I was like, yeah, I don't have to like it to comment on it. I don't have to like it to even make something with it, So this was very much my moment of like these two sources of inspiration. It's like World Tomorrow was the main surface level inspiration. You watch it in a surface level and you watch World Tomorrow, it's like, oh yeah, I see how you got there. And then Funeral Parade is very much a deeper level inspiration in terms of the structure, in terms of the atmosphere too, and just how honest and truthful it's being to my emotions and stuff, because World Tomorrow is very dry humor, dry delivery. So there's so many elements of that. So this film almost felt like it was coming back alive in my brain to infect me, but it never actually died, it never actually left. I just suppressed it. So it came out in full force in this film. It will come out again. Yes, yeah, it will happen again. I will be inspired by this film to the end of my time. So I hope that answered your question, Relpy.
I owe you like $2 again, Relpy, because you once again
I'm
answered
steamrolling these questions, man. Like the way I answered these.
You're yoinking all my
boom.
questions. Here, let me hit you with one.
Like a bowling ball. Like, get a strike.
All right. Here. So in Infliction, you've decided to start with a story about your friend Xavier. And you also end with that story. I believe it's
Yes,
Xavier's
I
ending,
do.
at least.
Yes,
The person
it
who
was based on
realizes
Xavier.
they have the tickets for the art gallery or for the museum, and once they realize they have more, they like bite their lip, and it's almost very sensual or even sexual. Where do you think the line between art and lust start to blend together?
Damn, that's a good one. I think it's very interpersonal. I think that's very much up to you. And I think that's a huge part of why I start the film that way now. Because that's been in the edit maybe 2 months max. And granted, I've been working on this film like every day for the past 2 months, like a lot. So that's a good amount of time in the edit room. Yes, it's based off a true story. Where this guy, I met him in a college, and he had these museum passes, and he wanted to invite me to go to one of those things, and yada yada yada. And he saw he had 5 instead of 3 for the month, and he actually bit his lip, and it looked like, and I couldn't say this in a film because I didn't want to be like, too whatever, but I was implied. It's like he was like getting turned on by it, and I was very much like what? At the time when I saw that, I must have been like 17 or something. I was very confused. I was like, what about this is so attractive or whatever? I didn't understand it. And I think that a large part of the process of the film was that I started to understand him. Not that I would be in the edit room like horny as fuck. It wasn't like that. It was more just this idea that that's your thing, and you just get really involved in it. And for him, I guess it's getting turned on at oil paintings. He finds it very captivating and maybe even sexually so. I'm not sure. I'm not him. I can't talk for him like that. I can only tell you what I saw talking to him and being around him. And one day we actually did go see oil paintings, and he got equally, if not more, as involved about talking about oil paintings as the way I'm talking about my own movie. I mean, he saw people in there. He saw families in there. He saw history in these brushstrokes that I did not see at the time. I still don't find myself to be an oil painting connoisseur or anything. I'm not. I respect it a lot more, a huge part because of him as well. But yes, it was. I thought it was very analogous to the film. I thought it was this idea of like, there's this person that is getting so captivated just by even knowing the thought that they're going to be in the presence of somebody else's artistry. And I thought that was, again, very analogous to the film. But also I thought it was very analogous to this idea that, like, it's a social experience. It's me telling the story about him. It wasn't like, and this one time I had 5 museum passes and I got super involved. It wasn't like that. It was a lot more of like, I'm witnessing somebody else do that. And I think that the film in general takes a very observer approach, where the documentaries and the film itself, they never really pick a side or a perspective. I think it was pretty early on when I was doing the posters and promotional material, because all the promotional material, spoiler, is based off of E's perspective. So it deals with Lucy a lot. And I remember somebody asked me, I was like, do you feel like Lucy is the main character and that Eve is the supporting character? Absolutely not. I think that they're absolutely both equally important. If it's usually one or the other on the screen, usually both. So it's just like they're equally important to me. And as a viewer and the perspective of the film, it's just kind of like you're seeing it, you're witnessing it. I'm not trying to make you pick a side, and through anybody's specific perspective. And the decision to end the film with that, with the actors actually coming out and being themselves and talking in their normal voice and not playing the characters, was very much inspired both, yes, by Female Pride, of course, in the documentarian portion of it, but also was inspired by this idea that, like, even off stage, we're performers. And I felt like, in a way, the story of Xavier disappearing, not disappearing from my life, but we fell out of touch. I wasn't necessarily understanding of what he was trying to tell me at the time, and I misread his signals. And now I understand him a lot more, but I understand him a lot more from the person he was then, not the person he is now. I don't know who the hell he is now. I've actually considered, like, texting him and seeing what's up, because I'm like, dude, I put you in my movie. And it's just like, that would kind of defeat the purpose. It's kind of like even Rory, right? Rory just gets up and disappears in this time period, whatever the hell, and that's it. That's the end of that story. So this story between me and Xavier ends very abruptly and very, very solemnly, in the sense that I finally got to understand him when it was too late for me to really confidently tell him that it was okay, and that what he was doing, his behavior, was also okay. And I really started to understand. I don't know how many people probably gave him shit for what he did. I just thought he was a weirdo, but now I'm like, I get you. I am also a weirdo, and I want to say I'm sorry. Yes. You know, and I do want to say I'm sorry, and I do want to know what he feels, which was the original line. Eve was supposed to ask Lucy how she felt about the museum, and it was supposed to be like really low in the mix. I'm sorry, and the credits would play. And then it changed. It changed because that was not my total truth. My total truth was to tell him that my behavior kind of hurt him, or that's how I felt. And, you know, even if he's not into that shit anymore, he was very passionate. He was very involved. And I got very passionate, very involved. And this film consumed my life the way that this guy got consumed by oil paintings. So that was a huge marker. And it also told me what the film really was. You know, and I'll make it quick, but there was a thing that somebody had said to me. It was like, you really don't know what the film is until maybe a month before it's done. You can really watch it, and the film finds itself. And that was one of those moments where I think the film really found itself. Where I'm the one being interviewed or being asked questions about this guy, and I have to end it by saying, yeah, you know, I just didn't understand. And I would tell him I'm sorry. Hopefully that was a good answer.
Definitely a different answer than I was looking for. You managed to answer, let's see, I think it's a new record, 4 questions at once.
Boom! That's crazy.
Yeah, strike out.
Strike out, baby.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit. I like the statement of you don't really know what the film is till last month. This isn't really related to that statement, but this has been in production for a year, maybe a little more, a little bit less, somewhere in that timeline, I believe. Well, obviously,
it's a year and a half.
Maybe been more than that theoretically, yeah. But you weren't working on it the entire time. As far as I'm aware, you took a really big step away from it. Like you just kind of shelved after you filmed, and you didn't touch it. Until probably since I've known you, and since I've known you, you've locked in, done this almost every day in VC in the Discord. Yes. Working on all sorts of things. Mm-hmm. My question about this is, what was it that got you back in the seat? What got you back labbing? What experience? Like, what was that click where it's like, this needs to get done? Let me wrap this up.
It was a few things, to be honest with you. Life works in this really weird way where sometimes it tells you things everything is based off perception. Oh wow, what a pretentious statement! But I don't know. It just felt like
first time you said that.
Yeah, first time I used the word pretentious. Ooh.
Bingo.
Yeah, that was a huge paranoia. Whatever. The point is that you see what you want to see, right? So if you go into this film and you want to see an Annexuo film, you see an Annexuo film. If you want to go into this film and you want to see two people talking to each other really cryptically and nothing really makes sense, you will probably go away and be like, wow, those people talked really cryptically and nothing really made sense. So, you know, a large part of the opening and stuff, as we talked about, was also just setting the tone and telling the audience what the film really is before they really get into it. But okay, so took a large break in July-ish. I did a rough read with the voice actors who were both here, actually. And we did a rough read without the visual. It was just a script. And I put that in the edit room, and then I had a rough edit of the film, and it sucked. Okay, for me, it sucked. And of course it sucks. But it was like, wow, I'm so unmotivated. And it had nothing to do with anybody that worked on it. It was totally my fault. It was like, I felt like I fucked up. I failed everybody that worked on it. I was so beat up by the fact that every time I watched this film in the edit room, I'm like, oh, whatever. I had no real emotional attachment or connection to it, knowing how involved and emotionally draining the shooting even was. I mean, I took a break from the film to do the casting for the voice actors, while I took a month-long break, just because I'm like, I am emotionally exhausted and I can't work on this right now. So coming back to it, I was like, yeah, I'm going to be able to work on it. And then I needed a much larger emotional break, I think, because I edited the film in the way that was like very strict. And it wasn't lenient of the idea that my ideas had changed and my thought processes online had changed. And yeah, it was in a really rough state. And then I felt very demotivated by the fact that it was just like, and there was a lot of cope happened. But the biggest statement that I think is very true that I felt during this time period was I felt like I would not give myself the time to watch this movie. Like, I would not sit through 12, 15 minutes of it the way it was then. Yeah, I didn't like it. And that was enough for me to really take a break from it. And I started different projects, and I came up with different ideas that I quite do like, and I do want to explore. And I also worked on other films, cinematographer on one of the films. I did the Ulterior Motives 5.1 mix and the Blu-ray with Ariel Emerald. That was also a really cool project that I got to work on during that time period. And then I had a conversation with someone about not feeling seen, I think, and it was just really frustrating because it was like every time I wanted to have a conversation with this guy, they would just kind of like talk about themselves, and it threw me off. I was like, oh, and then I told them that, and then they were like, oh, I didn't realize that was how I was making you feel. And it made me, like, I don't know, it made me think of my film, as selfish as it is, as I just criticized that. I told him, I said, you talk about your music a lot. I don't get to talk about what my projects are like. And then he kind of hit me with the truth, which was like, well, you've been working on a lot of other people's stuff. What about your stuff? You want to be a director. You want to be a writer. But you're not directing and you're not writing. You're shooting and you're editing and you're VFXing and you're doing the music. But you're not writing. Your voice isn't there the way that it is in Fabrication of Victim. And I was like, oh, wow, that's very true. I just perceived you doing that. And then there were other things, like me and a really, really, like, true sister to me. We watched Kung Fu Panda drunk, and I swear to God, the way that Oogway was talking to me made me go, man, I gotta finish that movie. I don't want to let down everybody that worked on that movie. Because, again, on Victim and Fabrication, that was a singular process. I wanted to collaborate with people on it, but really all I did was test screen and get ideas. But with this, I had actors and I had people taking behind the scenes shots, and I had all these people that were attached to it, working for free, by the way. And I was like, man, it would be a terrible disservice if I just didn't do anything with it, man. I felt terrible about that. And then this is what happened. I make 4 edits of the film. One of them I make with no sound in the beginning. I just cut. I don't look at what has VFX or not or whatever. I just look at the actors and the body acting and what they do. Then I put the voices in. And that cut screened well. It was the first time where people were like, yo, you got a movie here. This is kind of interesting. I like the vibe. And that was my signal. And that must have been early January, maybe even later. No, it was late January when that happened. Sat on it for most of February. And then I want to say March. I was like, okay, I've collected enough thoughts on this film, right? Because I must have screened that version to like 25 people. All right, collected enough thoughts on that. Been annoying enough about all that. Time to go back and finish what I started. And a huge part of the process is getting in that mood. Getting in that mood that I was in 2025, around this time of year, last year. And like really getting in that vibe, because my mood had changed. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so proud of the ending right now, and the me talking to the actors, because that's a very much a me now idea. That wasn't a me then idea. I wouldn't have done that then, but I did it now. And there's an interesting idea that like I'm in communication with my past self, and it's very meta that like there's a 2025 me and there's a 2026 me, and we're working together to make this film as good as it possibly can be while staying true to its original vision, which also means that my next movie will be a little different. And I do want to warn everybody about that. My next film will be probably a little bit more urban and I don't know, a little bit harsher on dialogue and stuff. Those are all the kind of things I can say on right now, but it'll be different. There's different key figures attached to it in this film. But yeah, like overall, it was like this weird collaboration process. And as you've seen and as you noted, I've been working on this nonstop. Like I noticed I had the momentum, and I was like, I need to go. I need to test screen. I need to have these 4 people I constantly nag about ideas. I need to have this. I need to have that. And I've just been the one band. And then again, shout out all and everyone involved in the production of this, because everybody, when I asked for reshoots, when I asked for retakes, when I asked for advice, they all said yes. And I really am so fucking thankful for that. I'm unbelievably thankful that that the casting crew on this film have been so supportive and so available to work with me again, because they actually believed in the fucking vision, and that's so rare sometimes when you're working in these avant-garde things. It's like, you know, are they just doing it for a paycheck? Are they doing it for the clout? Are they doing it for whatever? No, this was genuinely a part where, like, I felt as if everybody involved was excited to see what I was doing with this film and trusted me. And that is a huge privilege. It was a massive privilege. And I think it shows in the film. I think all the performances in the film are what I wanted them to be. And I think that I could not be happier about that. And that was part of the process for sure, was getting to that point where I could say, I want to work with you guys again. I want to be worthy of your time again, and make it happen. So hopefully that's true, and hopefully it was worth your 11 minutes and 20 seconds to view it. So yeah, that was my...
For free, by the way.
For free, yes.
For free.
It would be for free. You'll be able to watch it for free, yeah. It's crazy. Jesus. Yeah, that was my return. So I would say it took a year of production in terms of, like, 2025 we shot it, 2026 it came alive in the edit, you know, that kind of thing. But everybody was involved from last year. Nobody really new came into the picture other than obviously like test screening and stuff. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was a 6-month hiatus, so technically a year and a half, but I would say a year. Comfortably, this took a year. Yeah, I can very confidently say that.
Whew, lots of time. Slightly more. So if there's anyone with a question, please. Oh, way up there. Jumper. They were eager.
So the question is, what's next for you, and how do you intend to go about that endeavor? Yeah, that's a natural question. I just wrapped this, so obviously my head is still very involved in Infliction, but at the same time, during that break, I had a few ideas about other films. And they follow a little bit more of like a profile that I was looking for. The next film that I'm going to do is going to be a very different part of my brain, is how I've been explaining it to people. This is very much the contemplative. I get stuck in my own head, and it's very slow and abstract or whatever. You know, it's not a slow movie. And like making these little things matter a lot. And I didn't really get to explore other aspects of filmmaking that I'm very inspired by. But that's not a bad thing. I think you say that and people think, oh, we got compromised in this version of Infliction that had, I don't know, like guns or something. And it's not true. That's not what happened. What happened was that's just not this film. That's not what this film is. That's not what it was meant to be. This film is... Infliction is Infliction. It's what it's meant to be. It is the way that it is designed in every single corner the way it is. The next film will deal with a character that I'm very excited to show to people, in the sense of they're a lot closer to me in terms of my like background, in terms of how I talk, in terms of how I express, more so than... Not to say that the characters in Infliction aren't developed. They very much are. But they're also very much representative of experiences versus really just being based on explicit people. So imagine instead of it being, hey, we're talking about Xavier and then there's a representation of Xavier, it's like, okay, no, that's kind of just based off of Xavier and really basing it more on people. I would like my next one to be longer and to be a little bit deeper into my appreciation for slow burns and slow cinema. I know that's kind of like a buzzword right now if anyone really follows film circles, so I'm sorry for saying that, but that's kind of the best way I can explain it, is just these slow contemplative films that happen. And then also, obviously I got my sci-fi itch on this film, and I do want to continue writing in science fiction, but go even more grounded into our current time and the way that we kind of perceive technology now versus obviously going all out on time travel. And obviously the time travel in Infliction is very much not like, oh my God, it's going to change everything. And it's more just another means of transportation. Like, hey, if you can travel from one city to another, why can't you travel through time? Ooh. And I liked that it was so like almost nonchalant. And I want to explore that in deeper world building. And also, in terms of the vibe and atmosphere, obviously this film is dedicated to C. May he rest in peace. And a lot of that came from him as well. A lot of it came from, what did he do in my life? there's a really interesting perspective taken on this film that no one's really explored, which is fine because it's really just for me to explore, in the sense that I was Eve when I was much younger, and he was Lucy. He was this person that informed me, said, hey, you're in your own time, stay there, and really do your own thing. But now that I've done that, and now that I've expressed that with C, there are other people, there are other experiences, there are other means of which I wish to pay tribute to that might result in a film that is a lot more adult. That's my number one warning, is that right now the drafts of my next film are a lot more like adult. That's the best way I can explain it. I'm sorry. It's just, and based on my experiences being older rather than much more contemplative stuff. On that note, also, there's a different key staff and key crew on it. One of the people I want to have as an executive producer is actually here, and we worked together on COD, and I want to give him a little shout out. Kira over here is one of my day ones, literally named his sim racing team after one of my projects, and I think he's one of the people that really understands what makes me as a person and as an artist, and you're my bullshit detector, man. Yeah, I like Kira coming to me around the time we're finishing this film saying, hey, I want to be more involved in your next film, was the first thing I heard that made me go, oh, this is going to be different. Like, this is going to be a different kind of movie, huh? I'm not going to just make Infliction 2. It's going to be this whole new thing and idea. And obviously I want to involve different people in it as well, but also I want to build a film family, and I want to be able to be like, hey, I'm making this new movie. You want in? Like, like just call on the phone and make it happen. So I'm trying to balance that as well, of course. To answer your question, you just nod up and down. Right? I'm going to assume,
You put him to sleep. You answered too
I'm
much.
sorry. I put too much in my... Nah. Yeah,
Well,
we got a
maybe
yes.
they'll
We got a
hit
yes.
their
We got a
bank account.
yes.
More than $3 now, so.
I'm assuming we
Anyway.
hit the time.
No, we have time for a couple more. We're going to reach 9 minutes here in just a moment, though. No matter what I do, I cannot escape who I am. That is my favorite and most impactful thing that stuck to me from Eve. He said by Eve. Of course, I have my own reasons why that stuck with me, but I wish to inquire about what that line means for you in the context of this film, especially with what you said a few moments ago, where you're more akin to Eve, while C is more akin to Lucy.
I meant that in terms of being younger. I meant that in terms of retrospective. I think that there are there are really three stories happening, obviously, with the documentaries, which we didn't get too deep into today. But I would say with the fictional plot, obviously there's the story of Eve and the story of Lucy. There's the story of Eve meeting a hero, realizing that the hero is maybe more, maybe less similar than they would have liked to just a person trying to make their own statement, realizing that statement, they can't run away from their own time and making what means to them. They're always going to be a product of what was around them, yes, and they're always going to be themselves, and that was a key arc for Eve, and that's why, like, in the end of the film, when he finally asked, quote, a good question, it was this idea of like, oh, you finally came around, and they're finally on equal footing in terms of understanding where they're at, and finally we get a good question. Did you ever lie for your art? And then did you lie to me? Did you validate this? Blah, 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 whatever. Writing BS. I also think that there's the story of Lucy, someone who, instead of really paying attention to their art pieces in terms of what they make in the future, they're just saying, wait, I actually make a success? I actually get to live for longer than 20 years? I actually get to do this? I actually get to do that? And then the big pivotal moment of the film is that they say, I get to meet someone, and they leave my life, and they're going to mean that much to me. I'm going to be here in the middle of God-forsaken nowhere reminiscing this person. I need to protect this person. I need to protect this person at all costs. I need to protect this future of which I have not lived. So there's this idea of this past that Eve cannot live, this perception of past and this glorification of past, and then there's this perception of future that Lucy cannot protect. And that is happening in the exact same moment in the film. They realize their own truths, and they're just in very different ways. So in a way, I think the film is a little bit of a mirror in the way that you might relate to Eve really hard because you're like, oh, dude, I can't escape my own sensibilities, which I talked about, happened on this movie. And then you might relate to Lucy of this idea of just like, dude, that one night stand, that one person, man, we could have had a whole future together. Man, we could have taken over the world together. And I just need to tell myself that, you know, and being a part of a different perspective of that. And I think that line in particular, I also wrote it in the way of like, Eve tells this story like a historian about Lapis and Ruby, about how no matter how hard Lapis tried to protect Ruby by going through time, by going through these different times and stuff, that she would pass away. It's like this thing that's just bound to happen. And then immediately from telling that story, that Lapis never came to accept it, that this was what was going to happen, Eve immediately says, no matter what I do, I can't escape who I am. Because they're not telling the story to Eve. They're telling the story to themselves. They're telling the story to themselves and realizing in real time, this is it. This is my Lapis insanity moment. And it needs to end. And I need to realize who I am. So that was the writing analysis part of it. Now, granted, if you all have different interpretations of it, please feel free to have them. I'm just being annoying, and I probably said too much. But that's the way I wrote that and interpreted it. Yeah.
Oh, lovely. That is that gave me quite a bit of insight into my own thoughts about it. We are a minute away from 9 o'clock. That means we have time for the final question, which I shall ask you now. All right, this question comes from yourself, and you've actually just asked it a moment ago, and in the film, the question is, have you ever lied about your art? And if you're so,
shit,
how have you?
That's good. That's fucking good. You did it. You did the thing.
Have I ever lied for my art? I think, you know, in that answer, the answer that Lucy gives, sometimes you have to. I think that's very true. I think I wrote my truth in that moment. And if there's any character that I think I resonate most with now, it probably is future Lucy. If that's a question to answer, it's just like the monologue that future Lucy has in the film. It was a fucking mirror. I mean, when I got the lines back and I was listening to them, I was tearing up because of how convincing it was of my own internal thoughts and monologue and how Liv performed it. And I don't know if that was my direction. I don't know if that was Liv. I don't know what that was. But I was very emotional when I was listening to those inner monologues. It was just like it was borderline scary, but it was a good kind of scary. It was like, wow, I really put myself in here. I'm finally here. Which obviously she says all the time. Anyway, did I ever lie for my art? I think you have to. I think that, like I said earlier, there are a lot of truths within lies. And that even when somebody tells you something that's not true, there is elements of truth in it. And it's always important to recognize that there are truths in every lie. And in many ways that there are lies in every truth. When somebody tells you, hey, I did this thing, you're not hearing about the 10 things that failed. When you hear about a success, what about the 15 times that they got denied by somebody? What about the 25 times that they got, messed up? It didn't work out. It was a waste of their time. So sometimes even truth can be lies, and lies can have truth. When you say, I don't want to do it, well, maybe you want to do it, but you're scared. So there's a little bit of truth in that you kind of don't, but you also kind of do. And that's kind of the idea behind it. So I think, yes, it's lame to say I agree with the character in my own film, but it is my film and I wrote it, so fair enough. If it was somebody else's film, I probably would have had a more interesting answer to this one. But thank you. I appreciate the meta aspect of that.
Yes.
And it is very meta that I'm getting interviewed in a movie that deals so much with interviews. So
very much so.
Yeah, very much.
Well,
so.
I think that was a lovely question and answer to wrap us up. That being said, you will be sticking around for people's questions. Sorry that our time is so short. However, if we can all give it up for Annie one last time, you've made a brilliant film. Clap, clap, clap. That is truly wonderful and something this scene really, really needs. So thank you very much.
Proud of you.
Yes, we are in fact very proud of you.
Very, very proud of you.
I'm trying.
The last thing to be said is thank you all for coming to Production House. Now that you found us, welcome home. And have a lovely night. Thank you, Annie. Thank you, audience.